I've been at this game for over 40 years in you're looking at what's going on geopolitically. I have never seen clear paths to World War III until last year, and this year they're becoming clearer, and we're becoming closer. We're not going to be worried about 2.5%, 3%, 4% of GDP on defence if things go wrong, and we're on a very fast path to things going wrong.
So Keir Starmer then has announced plans to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. The hike would take it to the highest level since the Cold War. The increase comes as the Prime Minister prepares for his meeting with the US President Donald Trump in Washington, a meeting the Prime Minister will hope will convince his counterpart to reverse his position on Ukraine.
We must find courage in our history, courage in who we are as a nation, because courage is what our own era now demands of us. So starting today, I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
Keir Starmer speaking earlier. Philip Ingram is a former British military intelligence officer who helped carry out previous UK financial defence reviews. Philip, good evening to you. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening.
Should we talk about what this looks like from 2.3 to 2.5% of GDP? It feels like small figures. The amount that Keir Starmer was touting today was 13 billion, although the Institute for Fiscal Studies and others have pointed out actually that increase would mean £6 billion extra. We still don't know quite where that lands. But what are we talking about here on the ground? What does this increase in defence spending look like?
Well, unfortunately, it's going to look like not an awful lot because we're seeing changes in other indices that will affect defence. For example, exchange rates, the dollar rate, the increase in oil prices and all the rest of it. So a lot of that additional money is just going to be absorbed in staying still with current projects. We need a bigger increase than this to try and make a difference, or we need to make our procurement much more efficient. And I was heartened by the fact that the Prime Minister said he was creating this organisation to try and make defence procurement more efficient.
OK, so you congratulate that. But look, I mean, it is still a significant amount of money, even with exchange rates and whatnot. Where would the priority be? If we look at, I mean, it's a sorry state of affairs to some extent, but we've talked about the fact that the armed forces are depleted in number, that there are issues with trying to recruit enough people into the armed forces, issues with trying to retain them, and, potentially how much people are paid, what military equipment is like, how much of our military equipment is actually ready for a battlefield, for example. So let's, talk practically, if we can, about priorities. If there's £5 billion, let's just settle on that for now. Where is the priority? Because it's still an awful lot of money. And I think that, if you're going to take away from the international aid budget, you better be absolutely sure that you can see where the money's going, surely.
Well, what defence expenditure will do, and if you look at what defence does in the international community, it goes out and supports where there are disasters and all the rest of it. So defence actually supports international aid in many cases, and international aid supports defence. But where do you start in defence? It's been run down for so long. It's very difficult to work out. The Navy's got a fantastic power projection capability, been able to protect our interests around the world with the aircraft carriers we've got. But what it doesn't have are the support ships to be able to provide the protection that's needed around them, the submarines that are needed to provide the protection underneath the seas. And of course, we've got our independent nuclear deterrent that is coming to the end of its life and needs to be renewed. So that's critical. Within the Air Force, we don't have sufficient combat aircraft. We don't have sufficient support aircraft providing logistics support and transport support around the world. We don't have sufficient pilots. Our pilot training capacity is woeful at the moment, and we're having to rely on the Americans and other international partners to provide that. And the army is probably the biggest disaster that there is going. We've got one of the biggest defence budgets in NATO, and one of the biggest, and per capita, that's a bigger defence budget than many of our supporting countries. The Poles have got a smaller defence budget. They're buying 1,000 new tanks, 1,000 new self-propelled artillery pieces. We're converting 148 Challenger 2 to Challenger 3. We have got no replacement for the Warrior infantry fighting vehicle. We've got limited replacements for other vehicles. Our armoured vehicles are woeful at the moment, and the one thing the Ukraine war has shown is that if we don't send our troops out under protected cover, they die. And the army is the most vulnerable at the moment.
Yeah, look, there's a piece by the Times' excellent defence editor, Larissa Brown, that was up online this morning and may well feature in the paper tomorrow. And it talks about how British soldiers have been laughed at by European armies for their ageing rifles, which would leave them outmatched by Russia on the battlefield. That is what sources have told Larissa Brown and the Times. So there you go. Our ageing rifles are the laughing stock of Europe, which doesn't feel particularly encouraging, does it? But it also, I mean, judging by the list that you've just given me there, Philip, it feels that this is not enough. It comes at a very difficult point for Keir Starmer, where he's having to sacrifice international aid to make this happen. And there is an argument, is there not, and I wonder how you feel about this, that if you take international aid away from countries, it can make them more unstable. It can make people perhaps lean more into terrorism because there aren't enough programmes to sort of keep them out of trouble, if you will. So this does make countries which receive foreign assistance from the UK, it does make them more vulnerable, which in turn could affect the security of the UK.
Yeah, you're 100% right. There are a lot of other things that he could do that would have no impact on the UK from a global perspective, no impact on the UK from a domestic perspective. So, if he reversed his, and I don't understand the logic behind his push for the Chagos deal, where we're paying nothing at the minute, and he wants to pay £19 billion to Mauritius to give them the Chagos Islands. If he reversed his decision on GB Energy, which has been proven is not going to provide the jobs that he'd said pre-election, and said we will go into that project whenever the fiscal environment lets us to. There's another £3 billion. If he got rid of the £13 billion that's going on green energy projects overseas and say we'll go to those whenever the rest of the world puts green projects as a priority, and when the fiscal environment allows us to. There's another £13 billion. There's so many projects that he is politically agreeing to, but he's trying to suggest that he has to cut the international aid budget to deal with defence. If defence goes wrong, where we are at the moment, I've been at this game for over 40 years. In you're looking at what's going on geopolitically. I have never seen clear paths to World War III until last year, and this year they're becoming clearer, and we're becoming closer. We're not going to be worried about 2.5%, 3%, 4% of GDP on defence if things go wrong, and we're on a very fast path to things going wrong.
OK, well, there's a start warning from you. Are we on a war footing with 2.5%?
No, we should be on a war footing, and we should be on 3 to 5%. What I think, Keir Starmer, looking why he's done this. He's done this because he's going to the United States on Thursday. He wants to say something to Donald Trump to say that he's serious about defence and everything else. Donald Trump has talked about 3% or 5% of NATO countries to defence, and Keir Starmer came out with a 2.5 in 2 years' time, and then a path to 3% at some stage in the future. That's a really good start. But actually, if he was being serious, what he should say is 2.5% now. And the Strategic Defence Review team that are now, they were given the answer, 2.5%. They're not going to have anything to do. He's taken everything away from them and just announced it. So what are they doing? And they're getting paid a lot of money to do stuff. What he should be saying is we've asked them to map out a path to 3 to 5% if necessary in the future, so that we're ready for that if it comes. But there's This is a political statement. The logic behind it isn't quite there at the moment.
Well, look, it's better than remaining at 2.3%.
Oh,
is the
very much so.
other perspective to throw in there. It is a move in the right direction, maybe not far enough, maybe not fast enough, but it is on the way at least. Philip Ingram, thanks for joining us. Always appreciate it. Former British military intelligence officer who has helped carry out previous UK financial defence reviews.